This video is going to be a monster. At its core, the Q editor component is quite simple. However, there's so much richness and features available to us that this is going to end up being a monster video. Just keep in mind that a lot of the stuff I'm going to show you, especially at the start, is quite simple and straightforward, and you might not need a lot of the flexibility that we're going to delve into. I just wanted to make sure that we cover the entire API. So let's dive right in. Quasar, new, page, and we'll throw that in the components directory, Q, editor, page. Let's check that that's going to show up. There it is. Let's open the Q editor page and just test that everything is working. It works. And we're ready to get started. So let's have a look at what the Q editor looks like. First of all, we're going to make sure that we model some data. You have to model some data with the Q editor component, and it can't be set to null. A lot of other input components can be set to null. Q editor needs to be a string with some sort of a value in it. So let's say, for example, editor text. I'm going to copy that, data, return an object, and there we go, editor text, and we'll make that an empty string. There we go. We've got something that we can play with straight out of the box. And notice that it gives us the stuff that you would usually want to see in an editor component in the toolbar without you having to configure anything. In fact, for a lot of you, that will be all that you need. Now, next I want to add two cards. We'll have a card underneath here that shows us the underlying data for the editor component. And then we'll have another card under here which will show us basically what the result will look like if you were to use the HTML from this component. So let's go ahead and do that. Q-card, and then we'll want to throw a Q-card-section in there. And then inside that, we'll throw some pre-tags, which are really good for showing us code or just like some basic layout stuff. I want to add a style here, but let me just quickly show you why I'm going to be adding those styles. So if we paste that in there, maybe separate this a little bit by saying class equals Q-margin top extra large. There we go, just to move it apart. This is an example, and let's make that bold. And maybe a new line here over to the right. Now notice that it's going to spill over the edge here. In order to stop that, I'll say style is equal to white dash space pre-dash line. Okay, so if you want to play with this and see what the underlying code looks like, it's just nice to know that you have that available to you so that you really can see exactly what's happening behind the scenes with this component. However, we're not going to use that in this series just because it becomes a little bit too much. I just wanted to show you that that's available. So let's have another Q card at the bottom here. Class is equal to Q-margin top extra large, and this will just be the result available to us. Q-card-section, and then we'll say here v-html is equal to whatever we get out of that component. So this is an example, and notice that when I bold this, it's going to show up there. Now that's because we're saying v-html. V-html means that the characters will not be escaped. If you say -text, they will be escaped. Now you need to be really, really careful when you use v-html, because if this data is coming from user input, it means they can do something called cross-site scripting attacks, okay? So if you're using v-html and it's user input, you have to make sure that the input has been sanitized server-side. So that goes beyond the scope of this tutorial, but just know that sanitation has to occur before you're spitting out something into a Q-card section like this. All right, so I wanted to make sure I do my due diligence there by letting you know. And one more thing before we get started, I might use the Q splitter component just so that we can play around with this more easily. I'll show you what I mean. We've got this Q-splitter component, and we can throw a template in there. Make sure I spell that correctly. And then we're going to say before, so that's the before slot, and then we'll have the after slot. Don't worry, this is going to make a lot more sense in a second. So we'll throw the editor into that before slot, and in the after slot, we'll show the result. There we go. Save it. So that's the splitter, and that means that we can move this left and right, and it's not working because I actually need to model some data here, which will be splitter. And if we set that to 50, then that means that it's going to be 50% full. I'll show you what I mean. There we go. So the splitter takes up 50% by default. If I were to set it to 90, for example, it will take up 90% of the space. Now we can say the result here is then going to show up on the right side. And we'll do a little bit of styling just to sort of finish this off and make sure that it looks good. How about in the editor, we say class is equal to full height there. And we'll make this square as well, just to sort of, so it leans up a little bit nicer on the splitter section. All right, that looks good. I want to change that back to 50. Don't worry, we're going to get into the nuts and bolts in a second. And on the splitter, let's make it horizontal splitter. Yeah, so this shows on the bottom. I think that looks good. And for the card, how about we make this bordered? And then we'll also make it square. So it's very similar to the text area we've got here. And we'll probably also want to give it a full height. How about that? Refresh the page. Let's remove that margin top and put instead a Q dash padding, or we won't need padding because that'll be covered by the Q card section. Cool. Now, last but not least is we want to make sure that the splitter itself is going to take up more of the height. So let's say style is equal to height. This is a trick I love to do all the time. Calculated 100 view height. So that's going to make it the height of the entire screen. But notice we get the scroll bars now. What I can do is then subtract the height of this area here by saying minus maybe like 100 pixels. And there we go. So now we can have text in here, the text, or the test, and we can move this up and down. Just sort of like fun to play with. I don't know, maybe that's overkill, but we've done it now. So let's dive in. If I say here, toolbar, I can then give it an array. And this array is going to accept arrays, and each of those arrays will be a section of elements. So for example, this would be an array, and notice there's a split there, so that's a new array. And then this would be another array. I'll show you what it actually looks like. If we say left, center, right, these are the names of the commands, and that will give us the left, center, and right commands. Whoops, make sure that that's a closing array there. Yeah, so that gives us the left, center, and right commands. And if we add another array, it'll give us a new section of commands. Bold and italic, for example. Oh, I spelled that wrong. Italic. And there we go. And let's just add one more section in here. Full screen, for example. So out of the box, Quasar gives us a ton of commands that we can use. And I'm going to cover all of them at the end of the video. But that's how you use them. You literally just throw the text in there and they show up straight away. Super handy and super easy to get something up and running fast. We can also put drop downs inside of this toolbar. So if I get rid of that, create an array, and inside here put an object, we can create a drop down. So the label here could be, for example, a line. And then we can have options, which are going to be the things that show up inside of the drop down. And now I can put in left, how about center, and right. We've also got justify as well. We might as well throw that in. And there we go. Now we've got this drop down. We've left, center, right, and justify. So that was pretty easy to do. Let's just do another one to drill this home. We could have one, for example, that says emphasis. Emphasis. Scroll down a little bit here. Let's give that some options and add some emphasises. Italic and underline. Save that. And there we go. We've got a whole bunch of emphasises. So this could be bold, and then italic, and then underline. And they're still going to work even though they're sitting inside a drop down. So it's really cool that we have that flexibility. And notice that that drop down is actually going to show what we have selected, which is really cool. Now notice that if I refresh the page here, a line doesn't have an icon. We can go ahead and give it a default icon by saying icon, format, align, left. That's one of the icons available to us I happen to know about. Oh, forgot my comma. And there we go. If I refresh the page, it's going to automatically have that icon. However, notice that when I change that value, it changes the icon as well. If you don't want it to do that, then you can say fixed icon is equal to true. And now even when I change this value here, the icon that shows next to the text is going to remain the same. So that's handy to know. You can also have a fixed label. So notice that the label also changes. It originally was a line, but now it's changing as I change the options. Well, we can just paste that down and say fixed label. And so now the label here is not going to change, and neither is the icon. So in that scenario, I'd imagine that I'd probably have a dynamic icon and a fixed label. Yeah, I think that looks good. So like left, middle, right. Whoop. And I think that'll look really good. Yeah, so it changes the icon so you can see where it's at, but you know that this is an align element. We can also change some options for the items inside of the list itself. So for example, we have here list, and this has two values available to us, only dash icons. Save that, and it's only going to show the icons. They're pretty self-explanatory, so that might be a good one to choose. And then you can also say no icons, no dash icons. However, that is not currently working. I've just submitted a pull request to get this fixed, and I'm pretty sure that that the team has already pushed out a fix for this, and that'll be in the next release. They work pretty fast on the Quasar team, at least in my experience. Now, another thing we can do is say highlight. Highlight is equal to true, and that means it's going to be highlighted to show that the option is actually set to something. And this is probably a better example to show in emphasis. Okay, so let's come down here, set highlight to true. And now notice that it's not highlighted because nothing is bold, italic, or underlined. However, if I put in text that is bold and then I make it bold, then it's going to be highlighted to reflect that it is bold. So that's just like another little option that we've got available there. And before we move on, for those of you that are building a multi-language app, I just want to show you how that could work using Quasar. So if I come down here and we say mounted, take a look at this. If I console.log this.$Q, that gives us the global Quasar component. And then I say language, lang for language, and then editor. Let's open up our command, refresh the page, our console. And now notice that we have this object here. And that's going to make sure that align is set to align in accordance to whatever our settings are for language. Okay, so at the moment it's in English, so align is equal to just the English word align. So we can go ahead and use that now. If I come up here, I can change the label from align to $Q, so the global Quasar object, lang, editor, align. Save it, refresh the page, and it's still going to show align, but that is actually dynamic now and will change depending on what, however you set your language settings. I've actually never used languages within my own app, but those of you that do use languages, it's good to know that you can use that inside of the editor component. It's pretty powerful. And this concept actually applies to icons as well. So if I go to quasar.conf.js and I open the icon section, yeah, we have all of these different icon sets available to us. And what Quasar has done is it's actually mapped icons like the align icon to all of the icons in these different icon sets. So it means that we could, for example, start with the material design icons, later on change it to the MDI version 5 icon set, and then it's automatically going to use the right icon in there. So it allows us to swap out icon sets. And I'll show you how you can do that. We can say $Q, go into our icons for the editor. I might have done that wrong. Let me just double check this. Icon set. There we go. And now align, and it's going to show us the text for the align icon. And now I can go ahead and use that up here. So the icon will be equal to, let me just steal some of that code. Instead of lang, we'll say icon set, editor, align. Refresh the page, and notice it's still pulling in that align icon, but now it will change the icon depending on the icon set that you have chosen. Really amazing stuff, especially for all of you that are building large applications, and you know what it's like when your boss comes along and is like, oh, we want to use this different icon set now. You want to be able to change that with relative ease, and that is possible using Quasar's built-in icon set. So that's just about it for the toolbar section. Now let's have a look at definitions. So definitions allow us to change a lot of these pre-built definitions. So like left, center, these are all definitions, and we can actually change certain details about them. And we can also create our own definition. So I'll show you what this looks like. Definitions, and that's going to be an object. And then the values or the keys, whatever you want to call them in here, are going to relate to the options. So if we say, for example, left, or maybe bold is a better example here. Let's go in there and change the bold definition. What can we do? We can change the label, so super bold, for example. And why don't we just go ahead and throw it in there so it's a little bit easier to play around with. Yeah, so that changes the label to super bold. What else can we do? We can also change the tip. And before I do that, let's just show you what it does automatically. Notice that if you hover over it, it just shows the word bold. We can say tip, I'ma make this bold. And now if I hover over it, it's going to use my own tip. Oh my gosh, I'm so not cool. What else can we do? We can also use a HTML tip. And I'm going to bind that to something. So we'll say HTML tip, copy that. And if I come down to data, let's go ahead and create that HTML tip. And I'm going to make that a span. And inside that, we can now do some HTML for that tooltip. However, the HTML tip only shows up within the options menu. The HTML tip will not show on hover. It will only show in this options menu here. So let me give you an example. How about we set style is equal to background orange. It's going to be a really ugly example, but something that's a little bit obvious. So this is gonna be bold. And there we go. This is going to be bold. So basically it gives you a little bit more control over that. That was a terrible example. But anyway, moving on. So that's the HTML tip. What else can we do? We can also change the icon, of course. So let's change that to person, just because that's the first icon I thought off the top of my head. So there we go. We can change that. We can also change the key code. So when you hold Control and press B, that's going to make some text bold. So bold, if I go Control B, then it automatically makes that bold for me. We can actually change that key code. And I've actually got a really cool site that I found that does this. Well, it's not my site. Somebody else built it. If we go keycode.info, yeah, we can actually press a key. So for example, S, and it's going to tell us that 83 is the key code for S. So let's come back here, and I'll set the key to 83. So now if I say Control S, it's going to make it bold. So Control S, that didn't work. So let me save this and refresh the page. Bold, Control S, and there we go. It's working now. So you can go ahead and change that key code if you'd like. Now here's where the real power comes in. If we say CMD, we can change the command. Now before I go ahead and do this, I'll probably make it so this is our own command now. So instead of bold, let's say my command, copy that, paste my command in there, and now we've basically got control over our own custom command. So let's put in here the word custom, and at the moment it's not going to do anything, but we've got our own custom command available to us that we can start playing with. Now, we've got this option called CMD, which is going to fire one of the editor components commands. So if we go back here and we open up a new tab, and let's search for exec command Mozilla. And that's just going to give us the API of the exec command. And so this is all the stuff that is available to us. How cool is that? Check it out. We're actually going to use one of them in a second. Let me have a look at what's available here. Oh, how about select all? So how about we make it so that we have our own select all command? So I'm going to jump back in here, and we'll say select all. And so if I click on that, it should run the select all command. So select me, click on that, and it works. How cool is that? We can even change the icon now to something like select all. I think that's the name of it. Yeah, so now we have this select all icon. Let's get rid of the label because it's probably redundant with that icon. Select me. And now we've created our own select all command. And how ridiculously simple was it? And another one I found on there, I think is, what did I see before? Font size. Yeah, here we go. We've got font size available to us as well. So let me just open these up again and give that a try. So how about we make this massive, And instead of select all, we'll paste that font size command. Instead of an icon, let's give it a label that says massive. This is going to be fun. And so massive is the name of the command now. Notice that the name of the command here has to then match up with what it says in the toolbar. So basically this just pastes in everything within your definition. It takes all of the functionality out of what you have in the definition there. And another thing we can do is pass it parameters. So we can say param, and let's set the font size to something massive, like 80. Save that. Let's see if that works. Make me big. Select all of that, and we can make it massive. How cool is that? Now, some of you might be crossing your hands at your computer thinking, well, Luke, this is cool and all, but I want a little bit more functionality. I want total control over my commands. Well, in that case, you can actually say handler here and get that complete control over your commands. However, I'm not going to show you that yet because we're going to go into a more in-depth example for how to use a handler to save data to a server in a moment. But just to show you that it does work, how about we say handler, method, and we'll jump into my methods section. Oh, I haven't got any methods yet. Let's come down here. Methods, handler method. I'm just going to quickly just console.log something. Console.log. It worked. Save that. What have I done wrong here? Forgot a comma. And there we go. And if I click on this, then it's going to call that. So you've got total control there. And by the way, we're going to actually receive the event. So you can have a play with that. Copy that, paste it in there. And there we go. We get the mouse event from that click. Pretty cool. We can also disable the command. So maybe you dynamically want to enable and disable it. So let's just set disable to true. And now I can't click on it. Or if you set it to false, it's then going to be clickable again. So that's cool. And we can also say type and set that to no state. So no state is the only option that we actually get for type. And that just means, for example, if I say bold here and make it bold, the fact that that is now highlighted because this has been bolded, that is a state. So what we can do is we can make it so that it doesn't have a state. So let's override the bold definition and just say no state. And now when I make something bold, let's get rid of massive there. Save that, refresh the page. Bold. Yeah, so it's going to make it bold, but it's not going to give us that nice sort of highlighted effect. So that's just to let it know that it does not actually have a state to be toggled on and off. Now let's have a little bit of fun here. Let's imagine that we want to save our work, or you want the user to be able to save their work. Let's get rid of all of this, and we're going to create our own save command. Save, and I'll come up here and say save, and we'll give it an icon equal to save. I think that exists. We'll find out in a moment. And a handler that says save as well. Jump to my methods section, and we're going to have a save method that will just console.log the event. Save, and there we go. That works. So now we can go ahead and add some functionality for saving it. And what we actually receive here is not only the event, but also proxy and the caret. So for those of you that really want super control over this, let me just show you that that works. Yeah, so if you really want to dig into what's available, then have a look at this. But it kind of goes beyond the scope of this tutorial. And I've never actually needed to use them in the past. But it's nice to know that if you want to create a really rich editor, you have that functionality available to you. But let's go ahead and dummy create this. So set timeout, and we'll set that to 2 seconds. So after 2 seconds, we'll say console.log, save it now, please. Smiley face. 1, 2, and there we go. That's how you might want to build a save component. However, in this scenario, it would be nicer to have some more feedback. So let's try it with a slot. So first we're going to remove this definition. Okay, so instead of having a definition here, there's another way that we can add functionality for a button. And this is going to give us absolute total control. We can use slots. So if I come in here, and then say template, hashtag save, then what it's going to do is it's going to notice that we have save within the toolbar, and it's going to slot this in for that save position in the toolbar. So here, save that, and there we go. It slots it straight in there. So let's go ahead and create a button there. So we're basically going to recreate what we had before, and we'll say @click is equal to save. We'll probably want it to be flat as well. And what else? Give it an icon equal to save. There we go. It's a little bit big. Size is equal to small. Okay, that looks good. And we probably want it to be dense as well, so it doesn't it's not such a wide button. And now we've pretty much just recreated what we had before. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if behind the scenes, Quasar is just using its own button component to create all of those toolbar options up the top there. So this still works. Click on that. And after 2 seconds, it says save it now, please. But now we can say, for example, loading is equal to saving. And what we'll do is we'll make sure that saving reflects whether or not the data is being saved. So if I come down here and add that to data, saving is equal to false by default. And now what we'll do is we'll say, when you click on save, this dot saving is equal to true. And then when it's done saving, this dot saving will be equal to false. So when we click on it, saving is equal to true. Therefore, it will be set to a loading state. And then when it's finished the request, coming back down here, saving will be equal to false. And therefore, it will no longer show the loading state. Lots of back and forth there. So let's click on this. 1, 2. How cool is that? So we have total control over what that looks like. And you know what? I can't help it. I want to go one step further, because I think a lot of you might want to actually build a saving component within a queue editor. So let's have a look at using a debouncer. And what that does is we can say, hey, when this is given input, I want you to save it, but only save it if the user hasn't given me any input within the last 2 seconds. So for example, you can say, if there has been input, then only save it after there hasn't been any input in the last 2 seconds. Okay, that's way too difficult to explain, so I'm just going to show you. Import debounce, I think it's debounce, from Quasar. So Quasar gives us this debouncer. Make sure I spell that correctly. Yeah, there we go. So what we can do is create our own function here that says save debounce. And then we'll say debounce and then pass it through the method. So this dot save. And then, for example, 3000 milliseconds. So listen closely, because this can be difficult to understand. If save debounce has been called, so if we call this method, then in 3 seconds, it will run the save function, unless it gets called again. If it gets called again, it's going to go ahead and wait 3 seconds again. So why would we want something like this? Well, it means that if we're typing in here, rather than saving it every single time we type a letter, we can say, hey, only save this if I haven't typed a letter in the last 3 seconds. All right, so this is probably going to be a little bit better with an example. I'm going to use that function and say, @input. Okay, so we're going to use the input event. So if I put some input into this component, then call save debounce. And check this out. Do not save unless I haven't been typing for 3 seconds. 1, 2, 3, and it goes ahead and starts saving it for us. How cool is that? You'll often see websites using this where they only save if the user hasn't typed lately, so that they can finish off their thought before the automatic saving actually occurs. So debouncers are really helpful in that scenario. So now I'm going to run through all of the commands that we have available to us, and then I'm going to go through everything that the API has available to us. So this is all viewable in the docs, but if you want to come along for the ride and just see everything that you can do very quickly, then follow along with me, because we're going to do that right now. So we just created our own save component. Let's add in here left, center, right, and justify. So we've got all of those available to us. Let's create a new section here. We also have unordered, which is going to give us an unordered list. We've also got ordered, which will of course give us an ordered list, outdent, and indent. Save that. So let's say, for example, click on that and say item, other item. You can change that into a number list. You can outdent that, and you can indent that. Pretty cool. We can also say, for example, and you've already seen a couple of these, bold. We can say italic. We can say underline, strike. That does a strike through the text, so I'll show you what that looks like. So you'll often see that, especially if somebody makes a mistake, but they want people to see that they made that mistake. We've also got subscript, and we've also got superscript. Save that, subscript, and then superscript. So sub puts it below, so at the bottom of the line, and super puts it at the top of the line. Good to know. And then we also have quotes as well. All right, moving on. What else have we got available to us? We have types of text in terms of like paragraphs, H1s, 2s, 3s, 4s, 5s, and 6. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And the cool thing about these is that when they're shown in a list item, it will actually show. In fact, let me just give you an example for this. So label is equal to headings. We're going to make an options menu. Options is going to be equal to all of the options within here. So I'm going to cut that, paste it in there. Hopefully I did everything right. Yeah, notice that it's already got that formatting that Quasar has already done for us behind the scenes. Thank you very much. And I'll just throw another one in here because we also have code. And what that does is it just formats it as code. So in normal text, if you have things like eyes, they're going to show up right next to each other because they're really skinny characters. But if you do that in code, it's going to make sure that they're spaced apart and all characters will have the same amount of space between them. So that's really good to know too. And if I just copy this and paste it down, because the next thing I'm going to show you is very similar to that. And we've also got sizes. So if I come up here and say size -1, there are sizes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. So let's go ahead and quickly whack those in. And once again, Quasar is doing a lot of the formatting behind the scenes for us. So if we go to sizes, you can see that a lot of that formatting is done. It's really cool. What else? We've also got remove format. So I'm going to have to come down here. I'm getting lost in the arrays and objects now. So we could say remove format, large, we could say, and then make it really large. Double click on that and remove the formatting. There we go. What else do we have? Whew, this is an exhaustive list. Undo and redo. Pretty obvious what they do. Undo me. And then we can redo it again. So we have that functionality out of the box, which is amazing because it's annoying to build undo and redo functionality. We've also got full screen. And I think this is the last one. I've also got print as well. So we can go full screen like that. We didn't even have to do anything to implement that. And then we can say, for example, print me, and then print the whole thing. That is the entire API of definitions that we have available to us. Pretty freaking amazing if you ask me. So let me get rid of all of that now. And one thing that I want to go through, because I'm not actually going to cover this in the video, but sometimes you might want to handle paste events and what's the other one? Like drag and drop events. So to do that, you can say at paste.native, and we can say handle native paste. And then, make sure I put the word paste in properly. We've also got at drop.native, and then you could say handle native drop, for example. And let me just show you what you have available to you when you use those. Jump into our methods section, paste those in, and I believe it is the paste event and the drop event that is sent straight through to us. So save that, console.log that event, And now let me just go Control V. Yeah, there we go. We get the paste event. And then if I were to drop something on there as well, that would work. Let me just find a file. How about my koala? There we go. Oh, that didn't work. Oh, it did actually do the drag event. You'll notice that that came up. So you have to stop the default action there. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to have a link to some code that I created to show you how you might handle a paste event or a drop event in terms of like sending that image to the server and then basically pasting that image or replacing that image back into the editor itself. So that can be a bit nasty to deal with. And I'm going to show you some code that you can just copy paste and work with yourself and have a look at. But I don't want to go into that in depth in this video because otherwise it's just going to be way too long. So let's get rid of all of that. And the other one we have is at import. And I already showed you how we might use that when we did the save debouncer. So that's the events. We also have some methods available to us. So let me just add something to the toolbar here, which will be called full screen. Or what about we call it my full screen? Because full screen's already taken. And let's throw in a template here, but I want to do my own template. And that will be my full screen. And let's throw in there a Q-button. And it's going to have an @click. And we'll throw an event in there, but I also want to add a label here. And let's just make it make it so. So when you click on this button, I want to make it full screen. So that functionality already exists. However, I just want to show you that we actually have methods sitting inside the QEditor component that we can hook into. So let's add a ref to this editor so we can reference the editor component. And when this is clicked, we'll say refs.editor. So now we are accessing this component. And now I can call methods on it like toggle full screen. So basically, I've just re-implemented the full screen functionality. Oh, that needs to be in its own array. There we go. And there we go. We can now make our own full screen functionality. In fact, next to that, let's put full screen because I want to show you some differences between what we can do here. We can say toggle full screen. We can also say set full screen. And that means it will make it full screen, but you can't go back again. So let's just go back again by clicking the original one. And then you can, of course, say the opposite of that, which is exit full screen. Really straightforward API here. So now clicking that will do nothing because we're not in full screen. But if I go into full screen and click it, that will just exit full screen for us. We can also run commands using the reference. So remember all of those commands I showed you on the Mozilla website? Yeah, so all of those commands, we can actually hook onto them as well. So if I come back here, we can say refs editor run command. In fact, here's a really cool example of where you might use this. You might want to say, for example, select all. So make it so should now select everything. So select me. Let's see if that worked. Yep, cool. So what you could do is you could say select all and then copy that. So how about this? First, we select all, and then we copy the text that we selected. That's something that you often want to do. That's often like a functionality that I want to create. So I could say select me and copy me. And now if I click on that, it will select it and copy it. And if I get rid of that and press Control V, I can paste it in. How cool is that? Nice. All right, what else can we do? One command that I've never used before because I can't really think of a reason why you would want to use it unless you're doing some more advanced stuff that I don't know about yet is refresh toolbar. So maybe, for example, you change something in the toolbar and you need to refresh it because it wasn't automatically updated for you behind the scenes. So we've got that refresh toolbar command available to us. You can also say focus. So notice that my caret is not showing up here. When I click on this button, it now shows up because it has then been focused. Okay? Not showing, showing. That's pretty cool and good to know. And the last one is get content element. And since this is a getter, we're going to have to do something a bit different here. How about this? I'm going to cut that. When you click on this, we'll say get element. And we'll go to our methods and we'll create a new method that says get element. And then we'll say this refs editor. So we've accessed this editor now and get the content element. And I want to log that just to show you the result we get there. So what that's actually going to give us is the entirety of this element. So everything within this component. Let's click on that. And there we go. Notice there's nothing in there because I haven't typed anything. Typer T, type, and now click on it again. And there we go, typety type shows in there. That's pretty cool. Moving on to the world of props, and this is especially useful for styling and a couple of other functionality that we have. All right, so I told you that this is going to be big. Now we can say full screen. That's a property available to us. And if that is equal to true, then it will be full screen. Make sure that's interpreted. Save it. And that means straight off the bat, it's going to be full screen. So that's good to know about. And you could, for example, model a property that says full screen behind the scenes there. What else do we have? We also have no dash route dash full screen exit. And what that means is if we're in full screen and the route changes, it won't remove us from the full screen in this component. Okay, so by default, if I change routes and this component is still on the page, the component will remain visible. However, if I have this set, then changing routes will not take us out of full screen. So, I mean, honestly, something you'll probably never use, but it's nice to know that that functionality is available to us. We can also set a placeholder here. Type in me, please. There we go. So that gives us a placeholder, but when we click on it, it disappears. I typed in you. There we go. What else can we do? We can set it to read only. Save that. And now, if I try and change anything here, it's not going to let me. I can't type in there anymore. And this could be particularly useful for displaying the content. So for example, instead of using a Q card here, how about this? Let's say Q-editor, and I'll probably have to go class is equal to full height to put that full height back into it. And let's make it so that it is read only. And we'll also make it so it's got no toolbar as well. So that's going to be equal to an empty array. Save that, refresh the page. Oh, and it needs a default. It needs a value to be modeling as well. So model is going to be equal to editor text. And that doesn't even need to be modeled. That can just be value. Save that, refresh the page. Now if I come up here, remove read only, I can type in here the text. And this is just another Q editor that is read only and doesn't have the toolbar. So if you want to know that whatever shows in here is going to show precisely the same way down here, then you could do something like that. And then, bolding and all that's going to work as well. So that's good to know. Before I move on, let's get rid of this template just to streamline things a little bit. Make it simpler, get rid of toolbar. Yeah, just so we're back to that original state. And apart from read only, we also have disable. So maybe you're sending a request to the server and you want to make sure that the user doesn't press anything while that request is being sent. You can click on, you can enable this, enable the disable attribute. And that's going to be particularly helpful if you have a form, for example, and it's submitting that form. And if you don't want them to change things whilst that's submitting, then you might want to use the disable flag there. So that's how it's kind of different to read only. Now we also have a lot of styling props available to us. So we can say square, and that's going to square off the edges rather than being round. So really basic stuff. Oh, we were already using that. We've also got flat, which is going to remove all of those borders there. We can also say dark, and that's going to give it a dark theme. It's ridiculous how simple that was to do. And we can also change things within this editor area. So for example, min-height. So we can say the minimum height has to be 800 pixels. And that's going to make sure that it's at least 800 pixels high. So we can also say maximum height. However, there's something you need to know about this. I'll tell you in a second. If I set the max height to 50 pixels, so something really small, notice that that doesn't really seem to have worked. And that's because I'm pretty sure that a minimum height has already been set behind the scenes. So we'll have to say, for example, minimum height is equal to 0 pixels. Refresh that page. Oh, and the last thing is just to get rid of full height up there. Yeah, there we go. It just means that we had that control over that now. Whereas if I didn't have that minimum height set to 0, it doesn't quite work. So we can set the maximum height, and we can also just set the height itself. So if you want this to be fixed, which is particularly useful if you're using a form, you can just set the height. So maybe like 150 would be a sensible height for you. Yeah, so especially if this is a submit form, that would be a really good thing to do, to set the height to something specific. Now let's get rid of this. And it's probably no surprise to you that we can also change some of the styling on these buttons as well. We've also got Toolbar Outline, and that's going to give an outline style to the buttons. So it kind of gives a university feel to it. I'm from Australia. In Australia, we call it university, whereas in America and other places, I think they call it like college or something like that, or uni for short. Anyway, so we've got outline. You've got push, which gives it a kind of a gamey feel, like you're playing a video game or something like that. And then we've also got rounded. And that just feels nice and pleasant. And you can't really tell that it's rounded unless you hover over it, but it's the details that count. So I think that's really cool. Now you can actually go ahead and change the styles within this content area directly by saying content-style. And this has to be an object. So let's go ahead and make that interpreted. Give this an object. And say, for example, font size, and set that to 1.4 EM. Something like that. Let's see what that does. And notice that it's going to make the font bigger. So the default font size, if you want to make that a little bit larger for whatever reason, you can just set that in the content style. And of course, we also have content class available to us. So you could, for example, say Q-padding or extra large, and that's going to increase that padding area around here. Good to know. And what kind of a component would this be if we couldn't at least change some of the colors? So let's go ahead and change the toolbar color. Toolbar-background is equal to, how about light blue? And there we go. We probably want to change the text color if we're going to do that. So let's say toolbar text color and make it white. Now, something to note here is that when I say toolbar text color is white, that will also change the text color within the drop-down menus. I'll show you what I mean. We're going to have to put a toolbar back in here, make that an array, and inside that array, we're going to have another array, and inside that array, we're going to have an object, which will have some options within it, and they can be left, middle, right. I think it's center, not middle. Make sure that's a string, and then give this a label called align. Yeah, so notice that within the drop-down, it is also set to a white text color. However, if I say toolbar color without the word text, the toolbar will be white. However, the color within this menu, it does not get changed to white. So just a little bit of nuance there, that's good to know. Toolbar color and toolbar text color are slightly different in that regard. So let's change that to toolbar text color again. Maybe get rid of this toolbar. So now we're back to normal. We can also say toolbar toggle color. Where is it? There it is. And we can make that, for example, yellow. So now we can toggle these on and off and make, and we're going to end up with a yellow color instead. So that's pretty cool. You might also want to come in here and say content-class is equal to something like yellow. Actually, that would be more background yellow 3. And now it's kind of like a notepad. See, we get that notepad-y feel? I like that. I think it's cool. I like this. All right, moving on. What else can we do? We can actually add fonts as well. So we have total control over our fonts. And the way fonts are handled is really cool. If we say fonts is equal to, and then we give it an object of our fonts, the first thing is going to be the command for that font. So if I say Arial, or Arial, however you say it, don't actually know. And then the next thing is going to be what the font name is. So it has to be Arial with a capital. So let's add another one, Times New Roman. Hopefully I'm spelling this all correctly, otherwise it won't show up right. And then to use Times New Roman, the command will be Times_New_Roman. So what this does is it automatically creates an Arial command, which will set it to the Arial font, or a Times New Roman command, which will set it to the Times New Roman font, which is super handy. So now we can do something like this. Toolbar is equal to an array. And inside that is an array. And then we can whack our font straight in there, like Arial and Times New Roman. And there we go. So change the font. If I select that, that's going to make it Arial. It's really hard to tell the difference. So maybe just play around with this on your own computer so that you can notice the difference there. Cool. I like that. Let's get rid of that for now. And what else are we going to do? Actually, believe it or not, we have now covered everything that this component has to offer. However, there's one tiny little caveat that I wanted to cover before we finish this video. And that is, let's just remove the splitter here. I'll move us back to a simple example before I cover this. Oh, I got rid of the page element. Ah, Butterfingers. There we go. So save that. On some devices, autocorrect is going to kick in with this component, and there might be situations where you don't want autocorrect to kick in, especially if you're adding writing code within this component for whatever reason. So you can go ahead and disable autocorrect. And to do that, you wrap it inside of a form field, and you have to add some attributes to this form field which will disable autocorrect. And they are autocorrect, set that to off. The other one is auto capitalize, okay, because you probably don't want it to auto capitalize if you want people to have total control over this form without it changing on them. Auto complete as well, so you might want to set that to off. And then the other one is spell check. You might also want to set that to off, to false. So that can be really handy if you don't want the person editing the text in here to be interrupted by all of that functionality. So what you then have to do is simply wrap this inside of that form, and that functionality is taken away. That might come in handy for you. And one last thing I want to do before I finish this video is just show you an alternative to the editor component, because there might be situations where you want even more control, or you might be on the lookout for a different editor component. Let me just show you one other option you have available out there. So there's this thing called Prose Mirror. And Prose Mirror is a really cool editor component which has a ridiculous amount of configurability. And it just works a little bit different to the Q editor component. So one thing I'm a bit worried about, maybe I don't need to be, is I think the API behind the scenes that the Q editor component uses might be deprecated later on. And so that's kind of why one of the reasons I looked for other options. So there's this thing called Prose Mirror. And someone actually came along and turned Prose Mirror into a Vue component called TipTap. So if you look up TipTap, this is basically a wrapper around Prose Mirror for Vue. It's really cool. However, somebody actually came along and took TipTap and turned it into a Quasar extension. And that is called, if I remember, Quasar TipTap or something like that. Let's just have a look for it. Here we go. Jump into that website. And that is an awesome component that gives us stuff like video functionality, images, all of this right out of the box. I think it can even drag and drop as well. Oh, cool. Look at that. You can even select it and this menu comes up. So if you want that extra functionality out of the box, you might want to reach for these different tools that are available to us. Look at that. And you'll notice as well, if you hover over this, you can even change the URL to the video directly within there. It's just a fantastic extension. I think it's really cool. So there we go. I hope you enjoyed this video as much as I enjoyed making it for you. I know it was a monster. If you made it all the way through, then congratulations. And I'll see you in the next video where we cover another component. Thanks for watching.